Here's a video from Raws Alerts. This is breaking out of New York. Large crowds have gathered and are calling for the execution of Kristi Noem. So you heard him. They said Kristi Noem will hang. And we also have this posted by Rapid Response 47. Apparently we don't got audio. Where's the audio on this thing? Let me refresh it. It says it's working. Nope. Yeah, we're not getting audio out of this one. It says, left-wing agitators threaten the lives of our immigration officials. We're going to effing find you. We're going to effing kill you. You're going to effing die, bitch. Directly inspired by Democrat politicians, they say. So arrests aren't going to get us out of this. You can take a look at every revolution or civil war. Arrests just agitate. If you go around arresting a bunch of these leftists, they will use that and recruit with it. So what I see with all of this going on is the hyperpolarization in this country is so extreme. You're not going to go in and arrest 80% of California. And 80% of California is going to, maybe not 80, but 70% holds these views. So if you go and arrest Antifa, the entirety of the people in California are like, you're wrong.
Well, then everything that follows is just TOS violations.
When it comes to our Constitution, John Adams to Patrick Henry, they all said that our Constitution would only work if we all shared a similar moral framework, and they had related that to like a Christian moral framework. Mm-hmm. But now we have people who take bribes and eat cats and eat dogs and want you dead for disagreeing with them. That's not a shared moral framework. It feels like the only way that we could all survive is with a national divorce, is to separate the country into two and say, okay, Republicans over here and liberals over here. And that's not going to work either.
That won't work because of natural resources as well as weapon depots.
And nobody wants to give up that kind of power.
Well, not to mention that we don't have any states that are like overwhelmingly one party. Like most states are like 60-40.
The best thing to do is...
that's the same thing for the American Civil War. So the first Civil War, as it were.
Yep.
You will get people voting, and there's always going to be a degree of people who disagree. In the American Revolution, you had the Declaration of Independence, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
They had the Declaration of Independence, which was it was the loyalists' answer to the Declaration of
Right,
Independence.
and there was maybe around, was it like 20 to 30% were loyalists?
Yep.
Those are still like regional pockets where in America it's like one city in a state is deep blue and then the rest of the state's red. Where back then it was more geographically based. So a national divorce, it's like, okay, for example, you split off Illinois. Well, it's still going to be Chicago.
But that was true in the Civil War. Virginia initially voted 2-1 against joining the Confederacy, and then after Abraham Lincoln dispatched troops, they voted 2-1 in favor of the Confederacy. Right. You still had a third of the state. Maryland, for instance, Abraham Lincoln went and arrested them all, and they were locked out basically. Delaware and Maryland were slave states, but they were north of D.C. The point is, yes, look, if California decided to secede or something like that, the the conservatives in California aren't going to be like, oh no, they're going to be like, whatever you say, man. Because California is going to be like, we'll take your homes from you. We'll seize your assets. They're going to be like, no, just whatever you say, man. And the liberals in the red areas are going to be like, look, just whatever you say, man. You will get partisan violence. Yeah. Pockets will pop up. That happens everywhere all the time. But largely, I don't think that's the biggest factor. The bigger factor is going to be that Arizona is going to cease to exist, that Nevada will cease to exist. Mm-hmm. Whoever controls the Colorado River is going to shut California down. So Southern California, oh man, can you imagine what would happen if they just locked out the Colorado River and you got 13 to 20 million people in SoCal who will no longer have drinking water?
Mm-hmm. Walking Dead.
Oh, dude, they're going to be eating each other and drinking blood.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention, like, the thing that frustrates me a little bit about the national divorce rhetoric, among other things, is like, this has been the case for the last 70 years in the United States, is it's just the right making concessions. It's never the left making concessions. So the only situation in which a national divorce would ever actually occur would be the right, like, walking away from the table. And that's really frustrating. Like, I do think we're past time where the right should be playing for keeps. I think the right should be imposing their will on the left rather than the right always retreating at every single...
If the right said we're going to secede, the left would say we're going to kill you now.
So be it. Like, we go at it.
But like, my point is, regardless of what you want to do, war happens.
Yeah, right. So everyone should start playing Milsim Airsoft.
Yeah, that's an example of where I think the right should feel a little confident in themselves.
The best thing for them to do
We've heard this all the time about how conservatives are just better and they're armed. Well, California has National Guard too, and they have military. And when California goes to their young enlisted people who are trained, they are going to side with Gavin Newsom.
Yes, I agree. But like, for example, you do have red state National Guard still. And then as well, the Trump administration has been making massive changes. Pete Hegseth has been making massive changes in the structure of the military. Probably not primarily, but probably in anticipation in case something were to happen, there will be a loyalty test within the military. And that's why it's so important to be like taking out all these woke generals.
Indeed, because the hope is when Trump flicks the switch, the military and the National Guard in these states side with the federal government and shut down the Democrats. But that would mean we come to a point where Democrats are like, that's it. We are no longer adhering to the U.S. Constitution. And then the U.S. military removes them from power to keep union cohesion. If that happens. Otherwise, what happens is Gavin Newsom comes out and says, I'm in command now, and you will not listen to Trump. And you can go to some enlisted or, even an officer to a certain degree in California and say, I'm going to take your home from you.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm going to take your bank account from you. And they're going to be like, no, I'm with you, man.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, because this was before in the Biden years where people would make this argument and they'd be like, well, the majority of guys in the military are conservative, which is true. But like, as we can see with like police unions, it's tougher when you threaten people's livelihoods. You just end up shaking out a lot of those guys. They, like the military we saw during COVID, they passed the vaccine mandate, and that shook out a lot of our best guys. Yep. And
they banned the Gadsden flag.
Yeah,
they went around to social media profiles and removed people who had Gadsden flag, despite it being the flag of Virginia.
Yeah, so it's like even if it's true now that the majority of the military is based, and that is true, at least the guys that make up the military are based, they will come up with mechanisms to shake out the based guys before it really comes to blows. Like, they're not going to roll in and just hope these guys are going to be loyal to them.
That's true, but like, if they shake those guys out, those guys don't like forget the things that they knew in the military.
Oh, 100%.
So
that's why either way.
I just, people live in movies, man. Commie Butcher says, National Guard will not side with Newscom. Okay. Y'all watched Rambo? The National Guard, they're our cooks, they're our chefs, they work in our kitchens and our schools, they're our neighbors. People seem to think that National Guard are the same thing as the Army. Mm-hmm. When there's a dude who works on weekends for the California National Guard and Newsom threatens to take your children from you, he is going to lick Gavin Newsom's feet. And you know what? I know it's crass and probably offensive, and it's meant to be a little bit, but I guarantee you, with the left not having children and the right having kids, that's a tremendous amount of leverage the left will use against you. And you will see there's going to be a guy, it's as simple as a guy you've known forever pointing his gun at you and saying, I'm sorry, but I won't let my kids die. Right? If there's a natural disaster and there's two houses, each family has children. They got two kids. The kids are diabetic. I guarantee you, if House A runs out of insulin, the dad is going to go to put a bullet in the mouth of the other dad to get the insulin for his daughter. They're not going to watch their children die. And this is the basis of much of earthly conflict that we have seen. People saying, go near my kids and I will end you. Or my kids need food and I will do whatever I have to do to get it. And inversely, powerful people saying, if you don't serve me, I will kill your kids. And this is not going to be explicit, but this is the question asked of the generals in the Civil War, my home or my country. And if where you live and the food you have and your resources are tied to the governance of a Democrat, these people are not going to be hyperpartisan. They're going to say, tell me where to stand. And that's the conflict you're going to get. Trump is then going to go to loyalist states and he's going to say, quell the rebellion, and then you get fighting. Right now, we're looking through the thin veneer of this, with Tim Walz deploying the National Guard, stating we will not let the federal government use us as a prop. He's saying the National Guard's being deployed to stop Trump and the feds. And now they're literally fighting federal law enforcement. We saw already in Portland when the feds aided the local police aided and abetted Antifa, who had been obstructing ICE. And ICE went to arrest them, and the local cops protected them. Or the arrest of Nick Sorter. I don't understand why people don't get this. No cop would arrest an innocent conservative. They've been doing it. Did Andy Ngo get any help from these people? Did you guys see what happened to Nick Sorter the other day when he called Minneapolis PD and said, they're threatening me, I need help? They said, we're not going to help you. And he's like, what am I supposed to do? And they're like, too effing bad. And then he got chased and had to evacuate. Imagine calling the police in Minnesota thinking they're going to help you. The police in Minnesota are Antifa. They are the left. You're basically Antifa. Quick, help me from save me from Antifa.
Yeah.
I think the best thing to do for people is to get to a state that represents your values. And I know people say, oh, you always say that. Well, I did it. I lived in Massachusetts and I moved to Florida, and I suggest other people do that. Our Constitution was designed to be limited central government, and they proposed it. And with it, it came up with the general welfare clause, the necessary and proper clause, the supremacy clause. And, you know, New York hated it, and Rhode Island hated it, and North Carolina hated it. So John Hancock was like, hey, guys, how about a Bill of Rights? And like, yeah, that's a great idea. So then James Madison wrote the Bill of Rights. So what that means is that there's the 9th Amendment and the 10th Amendment. The 9th Amendment says just because we didn't write it down, it's not a right. And the 10th Amendment says, well, if it's not written in the articles, then that right belongs to the states and to the individual. So we saw that during during COVID, where, you know, Florida was free. Florida didn't have any policies going on with COVID, but New York was all locked down and California was all locked down, and these states were failing. And we saw states' rights in action. We saw it work in action. So while the central government that we have now has grown mammoth proportions, we still have states' rights, and we're still able to live in states that are freer.
We don't. States' rights?
Yes.
I think the 10th Amendment has been the Bill of Rights is Swiss cheese.
Why do you think Florida looks so different from New York?
Because the federal government hasn't decided to go and crush them.
Why wouldn't they have decided under Biden and Kamala to go and crush DeSantis?
Resources, time, energy, and different priorities. They certainly opened the border to allow a bunch of illegal immigrants to come into the country in places like Texas. And then they sent federal law enforcement to go and fight with Texas National Guard. So did that violate the rights of Texas?
When
Biden sent federal agents to go fight Texas State Guard?
I mean, what are you referencing?
Biden cut down the concertina wire on the border of Texas, and he removed the barriers in Arizona.
When it comes to the border, that's Article 4, Section 4. So that's actually the government.
So the states have no right to protect their borders.
I believe they do.
But is that reserved to them in any way?
Yes. So when the federal government is not protecting the border, so the federal government came in and said, hey, we're in charge of the border here. And they got in and did that. However, if they're not fulfilling their duty, the 10th Amendment comes in and says, okay, since they're not fulfilling their duty, then that means the states have the right to fulfill their duty. So that's when Texas brought in the Guard, and that's when Florida sent their Guard over to defend the border as well, when the federal government was shirking their duty.
So like the vaccine mandates, those were all state level?
Yeah, right.
And when the federal government tried to make it mandatory that businesses with more than 100 employees, that was not state level.
Some of it was.
They attempted, and they went to the Supreme Court.
Right. So I think it's fair to say that certainly it's in the Constitution, but we don't have constitutional rights. The federal government does it if they want to.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, like Mao was right. All power comes out of the barrel of a gun. So yes, the government has the government. I think the better phrase is might makes. Yeah, might makes right.
No, I didn't say might makes right.
Well,
might makes. No one ever said anything about being moral or correct, but those with might will get what they want.
Yeah.
And the left is exerting it, and they're proving it. And what they do is, when you challenge them on this, they respond with, so you're saying might makes right? I never said it was right. I said you're doing evil things, but if you have the power to do it, you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what we've seen for a long time. Congress is largely symbolic. Yeah. When was the last time we declared a war? Deploying National Guard from states overseas, I would argue that violates state rights.
It does.
Yeah. So when has the Bill of Rights actually been applied? The Constitution was written down, and today everyone is a textualist, not an originalist. Because if we were originalists, we wouldn't have guns. The states could ban them. If we were originalists, it would be illegal to blaspheme. But we're textualists. So right now, the problem people have is they say liberals are textualists and we're originalists, but we're not. Everyone. So for those that aren't familiar, it means liberals argue the text of the law as it applies to our language, and originalists argue what was the intent of the article of the amendment. Neither liberals nor conservatives believe in the true original text of the Constitution. Neither. For like example being, Second Amendment originally was that the federal government couldn't ban you from having guns, but states could. That's why in the 80s, you couldn't get guns.
Well, most of the states constitution reflect the
Indeed, so it's separate. The Second Amendment was explicitly that federal law enforcement of any kind or military couldn't take your guns from you. Now, if the state wanted to, they could. And in fact, that was normal. You'd ride up into town on your horse, and the deputy would say, "Sir, hand over your weapons." And you'd go, "Okay, now we've changed that." Free speech is a great example. I think it wasn't until 1840 was like the last blasphemy case. We have free speech, but you better not say naughty things about Christ the Lord.
I feel like this argument ignores the Ninth Amendment, because the Ninth Amendment says that the freedoms or the liberties protected by the Constitution or the Bill of Rights are not intended to say that these are the only freedoms they have. So basically, what the Ninth Amendment does is it reaffirms that people are free. Right? It says just because it's not specifically stated in here.
What does that have to do with what I'm saying?
Because you're saying, oh well, they could do this.
The original intention of the First Amendment did not include blasphemy.
Yeah, but
we've changed.
But then when you go, the way that it works though is you're assumed to be free to be able to do what you want. The original intent doesn't specify anything, so you have to go to the Supreme Court and say, hey, this is actually a violation. And the court has
but just to make sure we clarify and get it down to brass tacks here, my point is that in 1789, the First Amendment did not protect blasphemy. In 2026, it does. Was it brought before the Supreme Court and then they reversed it, or were you just saying that those laws were passed? Because the way that it works is you're assumed to be free, you're assumed to do whatever you want. I think then states blasphemy is still illegal in some states. And it's a cultural thing where we stopped enforcing against it.
Yeah, but the point that I'm making is you're assumed to be free and do whatever you want. Things that are in the Constitution are specifically protected. You're assumed to be free by the Ninth Amendment, and then states will go ahead and pass laws, and they'll try to infringe on your rights. And then if you go and you petition the government, you say, look, this is actually protected. Then the Supreme Court will say, okay, yes or no, that isn't.
I'm not following. The federal government said you can't blaspheme.
When did the federal government say that?
In 1791, that's true.
Really?
It's what I had gone back to saying about how we needed a shared moral framework.
The states required you to proclaim a belief in a Protestant God to hold office, and many still do, despite the fact they don't enforce against it.
So
the point is, everybody says the Constitution must be protected, but they don't realize that we, even people on the right, libertarians, conservatives, or otherwise, pro-Second Amendment, do not adhere to the original intent of the Founding Fathers.
Yeah, because
otherwise you'd be arrested for blasphemy.
If you have a law, there's a law that you believe infringes on your rights, or you believe that is in conflict with the Constitution, you petition the government, you go to the courts.
I agree.
And you go.
What the Founding Fathers did not intend for the First Amendment to allow you to besmirch the name of Christ.
Yep.
Just because they said that, and doesn't mean that.
They wrote the Ninth Amendment, they did not believe you could besmirch Christ. Your ability to argue to a liberal does not change the intent of the Constitution.
It's not about arguing to the liberal.
This is why blasphemy became legal, because the progressives of the time said, I want to insult Christ. And most people said, no, you can't. I don't care what amendment you cite. That was never allowed. But eventually, over time, progressives argue, I can do what I want. So where we are today, and this is exactly my point, progressives argue free speech is shoving a cop, and now they shove cops. The Founding Fathers never intended for you to have the right to attack militia, military, or law enforcement. Just because you can argue to a judge and that judge says you can do an illegal thing doesn't mean it was protected under the Constitution.
Yeah, we get so many examples of this now. Like when the whole debate was happening over whether or not we should take firearms away from transgenders. That's one of those things. Is like if you propose the entire situation to the Founding Fathers, be like, what? What are you
They had asylum issues. They had
like crazy people clauses. But now you can just get a judge to say, no, that's the Constitution.
This is the point that I'm making. The Constitution was intended to protect the society and the rights that they had actively. Okay. And they recognized that they would have some arguments and disputes, but 100% of the population agreed. No one can insult Christ. To be fair, it wasn't 100 because Jefferson was a deist, and that's why Virginia didn't require you to proclaim a belief in a Protestant God, but God in general. Maryland, largely being Catholic. Required you to was also more neutral because they were like Protestant, Catholic, whatever you want to do. Almost all the states up until the mid-1700s required you to literally say Christ is king to hold office.
I profess Jesus Christ to be my Lord and Savior if you wanted to hold.
Okay.
Also, Maryland
was... And the Founding Fathers, when they made the Bill of Rights, If you went to any one of them and said, hold on, but under the 9th Amendment, I'm free, so I can make an argument to the court, they'd say, no, you're under arrest. And it wasn't until I think 1840 was the last arrest for blasphemy. And the reason the guy actually, I think, went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, you blasphemed, and he got locked up. Mm-hmm. Blasphemy is illegal, and you have no right to blasphemy. That's not free speech.
Because God was held above the government.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also, Maryland was majority Protestant by the 1700s.
Nope, Maryland was majority Catholic.
It was majority
Catholic.
Protestant.
It's still Catholic.
I bet my entire life savings that it was majority Protestant by the 1700s.
Initially,
the initial batch were English Catholics, but then it became a Protestant colony.
Carroll of Carrollton was the signer of the Declaration of Independence. He was the only Catholic to sign the Declaration of Independence, and he came from Maryland, where they were Catholic.
Yeah, there was initially a Catholic colony.
Yeah, for sure, but that's probably why their stance was
Protestant.
They didn't require Protestant; they required a Christian God.
That was more related to like Freemasonry. The same with Virginia.
Yeah, and then I think throughout the 1700s, they started backing off from requiring you to have a faith in a Christian God. But it was still the practice. It was still largely done. So anyway, long story short, the point is the Second Amendment. What was the point? If you lived in Virginia, the federal government couldn't come and take your guns. Virginia could. That's why in the 1980s, everything was may issue. If you wanted a gun, the states could decide not to give you one. And the Fed was like, don't look at us. We're not taking your guns from you. But then we sued, and it wasn't until 2010 the Supreme Court actually said, nah, everybody can have guns. Because what's happening is, and it's intentional, states' rights are being eroded intentionally over time, and we're in favor of it. When we argue the federal government, the federal Constitution protects my right to have a gun in West Virginia for constitutional carry, I am saying the federal Constitution supersedes the laws and the Constitution of West Virginia. Okay, then that's federal supremacy over the Constitution and laws of a state. And that's the argument being made by conservatives, that Maryland shouldn't be allowed to ban you from having guns. And we're winning in that fight, giving the federal government more power to tell the states you can't. Yes, which is interesting because nowhere in the Constitution does it say states can't ban guns.
Nope. States can regulate a right. So that was the ruling. States could regulate a right. So, for instance, speech. You can't ban the speech. You can't ban it, but you can regulate it into submission. You can say, okay, well, you need a permit. You need a permit to protest here. You can do it between these times and that sort of thing. And then when it comes to guns, they can't ban them, but they can regulate them into submission.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.